I was one of the Native American children, adopted at birth and removed from our country's Indian reservation system. I was raised in a small middle-class farming community, but was never told of my true American Indian heritage. It was still taboo back in those early days. The years passed, and in 1987 I lost both parents. While going through their personal belongings, my wife discovered my adoption papers and she began a search. 5 years later, I was reunited with my biological Lakota family living on the Lower Brule Sioux Indian Reservation of South Dakota. I am a son of two mothers and a product of two worlds that had collided, but I have an equal amount of love and pride for both. I'm Paul LaRoche, and the stories you are about to see are an attempt to share this true American story of a hidden heritage.
Father Donald A. Dahl is an internationally acclaimed Jesuit priest who found his pathway to God through photography. Whether Native American or Africans, his elegant and compassionate images tell the stories of people without voices so that others understand and work to change unjust social structures. In 1962, as a young Jesuit from Milwaukee, Father Don began to teach 7th and 8th grade students at the St. Francis Mission School on the Rosebud Sioux Indian Reservation in central South Dakota, which then was a boarding school. He was well-liked and remembered, not only as a teacher, but as a championship-winning basketball coach. In so doing, he was introduced to photography and felt compelled to chronicle their stories through images because he respected and cared for them. Father Don's work has been featured in National Geographic. In 1997, he was awarded the prestigious Kodak Crystal Eagle Award for impact in photojournalism. This was at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and it was for his many years of work with Native Americans. Some of the members of our group Brule knew Father Don very well and set up a meeting for me. Here is some of that interview.
My name is Father Don Dahl, S.J. I'm a Jesuit at Creighton University teaching photojournalism for many, many years. Actually, I'm a professor of photojournalism. I hold the Charles and Mary Endowed Jesuit Professorship. It's an endowed chair, which enables me to teach half the year, and it supports my photography the other half of the year. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I went to the Jesuit high school there and joined the Jesuits right after high school because I was impressed with the Jesuits. And then there was 2 years of spiritual training, 2 years of humanities, 3 years where we got a specialty, and I got a master's in educational psychology. And then I was sent out to Rosebud, South Dakota to teach in St. Francis Indian School. The very first week I was there, they said, "Would you like to learn photography?" And I said, that sounds like fun. Yes. And so they gave me, as you know, they send a lot of old clothes and plastic cameras to the Native Americans, So they gave me a bunch of those until none of them worked. And I finally figured out the principal had a Leica, which is like kind of the BMW of cameras in his safe. And he finally gave it to him after weeks, so I kept pestering him. So it took me a year. Actually, I did photography out on the reservation for 2 years, and I finally took a class in photojournalism at Marquette University during the summer, came back to St. Francis Indian School, and we started the annual, and I started teaching photography to my Native American students. And so that's how I got started. And it was there that I decided, what am I going to do as a Jesuit priest? I said, I think I'm going to go on and I'm going to learn photography. Actually, it was kind of a profound experience. I was walking on the prairie, and you know how it is out there in Rosebud, those fall evenings when it's very cool in the evening. I was walking on the prairie and said, what am I going to do as a Jesuit? I wasn't a brilliant student like my classmates. My classmates, some of them are just brilliant students. I was not. And I said, I love the ranch. I learned how to ride and break horses out there. I rode in the rodeo, the Rosebud Rodeo, which is a nice rodeo. My students loved it, of course. Got bucked off right in front of the stands, right by them, So I said, geez, I'd love to be a cowboy. I'd love to run the ranch. But that was not to be. I said, no, there's no future in being a cattleman, a Jesuit cattleman. And then I said, well, I love hunting. Well, there's no real future in hunting, as a Jesuit priest. So I said, something inside said, stay with the photography, even if it takes 10 years. So it was kind of listening to that one's heart, that one's inner voice, which is, I really try to pay attention to what is my own heart telling me to do. I still do that with every project that has come up photographically. It really comes from inside. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. So that's where even the big projects came from. I should be doing a book. Right after Wounded Knee happened, I should go back out. I hadn't seen anything in depth on the people I knew after teaching out there for 3 years. So 10 years later, I went back and I did the book, A Crying for a Vision, and it was a trilogy. From 100 years ago, Anderson's pictures, then Beagle's pictures 50 years later, and then mine. And you could see a 100-year period. And sometimes the same people were in the pictures from photographer to photographer. And it was right after Wounded Knee. When was Wounded Knee? 73, 72? And I hadn't seen anything done. So I went up there in 74, 75. I spent a year, and I picked out a village. I wanted to be like W. Eugene Smith, who did The Spanish Village, very famous essay. He spent 3 months, and I looked at any number of villages, and I decided to go back to the students I knew and had taught. And we had a great relationship because I was also the basketball coach on the junior high, the B team. We won 2 championships, so that was pretty cool. And they all remembered that and remembered me because of that, I think, more than anything else. So it was a good experience going back. And that exhibit, that first book, kind of established my reputation in the country as a photographer. In fact, I was at a meeting and the National Geographic folks asked me, "What are you doing next?" I said, "Well, I'm going to Alaska." I got a small research grant to go to Alaska, and I decided to do something similar in Alaska with the Eskimos, because there was a famous Jesuit called the Glacier Priest who photographed there some years before. I said, I'll put his pictures together with mine. It didn't work out that way. Anyway, but I went up and I did a black and white essay. The Geographic editor said, "What are you doing next?" I said, "I'm going to Alaska." They said, "Would you like a contract from us?" I said, "Well, like I said, that sounds all right. Write me a letter," the editor said, and I did. He sent me a contract. And I was in D.C. for something else. I went and visited them, and they doubled the contract. So I had a contract to do the first black and white essay. It was called The Hunters of the Bering Sea, the Yupik Eskimos in this little village of Tuksuk Bay. And it appeared in the National Geographic. Then I did a second black and white essay because I saw that no one had ever done pictures of the Athabascan Indians along the Yukon River. And I did my second essay, and that appeared in 1990. And after that, I was asked to be a judge of the Pictures of the Year. And so I was one of 6 judges, along with people from the New York Times, National Geographic, and picture editors and photographers. We picked the best photographer for newspapers, best magazine photographer, and then picked the best magazine and newspaper that used photographs best in the nation. We looked at 30,000 photographs in a week. My God, it was incredible. During that time, I said, I understand now why they gave me an award for that first book I did on the Rosebud. My work is really different. And then kind of said, I should be doing something. That kind of my own heart speaking out, saying, I should be doing something. And I said, why don't I go back and interview the elders, like a very famous man who just did a book on black women, 75 black women who changed America. How did you do this? And he told me, he said, I would interview someone for 2 to 3 to 4 hours, and then I would edit the tapes, and I would have an editor of Life magazine edit the things down. And I would choose the picture. During that time, while I was interviewing them, the pictures would kind of rise up from inside. I should be doing this with this picture. You're in their home. He said, okay. And so I kind of imitated his style of working. The style was this. He said, never take pictures the same day you interview. It's a different process. So I would interview a person, and sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night for my photographic session, and I knew what I was going to do. So I always tried to enter a picture portrait situation with 3 ideas, 3 different compositions. And I had a Polaroid back for my camera so I could show people what I was doing. And it became a collaborative process. So anyway, I went out and I got a grant from Kodak to go out and interview men and women of the Sioux Nation who really made a difference in their own lives, in their communities' lives, even nationally. And I started with people I knew from my 30 years of association on both Pine Ridge and Red Cloud. So I'd go and interview someone, and then I'd photograph them. So I actually traveled for 2 years finding the people. And then I would ask every person I interviewed, who should I be doing next? Who really stands out in the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota Nation? And who should I be interviewing? And so they'd all have recommendations. And some people weren't too keen on being interviewed, but then I'd show them who I had done already, and that almost became a recommendation that, oh yes, okay, I'll be part of this. So, and a lot, as you know, the Lakota they don't like to put themselves forward, and so I'm saying, no, these people recommended you. One of my favorite is Alice Newholy. I just love her Takoja, her granddaughter, looking up at her. Alice Newholy was known for her porcupine quill work. That's one of my favorite pictures in the book. And, of course, I like Billy Mills, too. I photographed him in his home in L.A., so I like the way Billy's sitting there in that golden light with his Olympic medal. That's a nice image. And, of course, who can pass up James Holy Eagle when he was 102 years old? Tim Gallego is the one who recommended that I do James, and I went over there. And it was just amazing. He was sitting there in the sunlight and enjoying just a gorgeous day, So those are 3 of my favorites. And then I started going to powwows. I went to the big ones. Went to Rapid City. Denver was a big one, and a couple of my old students from St. Francis were the coordinators of this, Ken Ledoux, and I'm blanking what else. And so I set up a booth, and I had some Native American helpers who would identify the people in the outstanding outfits. And we'd ask them, I said, look, I'll give you an 8x10 photograph of yourself. Now, of course, this is before digital cameras were so omnipresent. If you allow me to use it in a book honoring the Sioux people. And so that's what I did. So I went to Denver, I went to Rapid City, and I went to Bismarck. The Great Sioux, the college up there sponsors this wonderful powwow in September. So I'd go to powwows, and I assembled this. And then someone said, well, you really should do the sacred sites. And so I would say, what are the sacred sites? And that's when I started doing panoramas, like of the Black Hills. The Betty Strong Encounter Center, associated with the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center, has been a marvelous venue for photography. And every year they host the exhibit, the photographs I do for the calendar for St. Augustine's Indian Mission. And it's a marvelous, people love looking at those pictures, and the children do too. What I love about doing the calendar is this. I've been doing the St. Augustine Indian calendar for 10 years, and they use it to raise funds for the school. But what I love best about the calendar is the pride it engenders in the children and the parents and the grandparents of the children featured. And it seems to have induced a sense of pride. Yes, I am Native, and I am proud to be Native here in my regalia, in my dress. So that's the thrill of it for me, to help in some small way, help Native Americans become proud of who they are. Well, I think my role photographing Native Americans, aside from the calendars, I've backed off because I think it's your role to be doing Native American stories. And my friend Kenny Blackbird, who's up in Cody, Wyoming, is doing a really nice job. And I encourage him and others to photograph, tell your stories. And if I can help in any way, help you tell your stories as Native American, please call me, and I'll help in any way possible. So a couple of my students are down at NETV. Do you know Princilla Parker? Yeah, so Princilla's down there. And Georgia Lee, they were both of my students. So I'm really proud of them and that they're participating in helping make and tell stories, Native American stories for NETV, Nebraska Educational TV.
I'm Marcia Poole, director of the Sioux City Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center and the Betty Strong Encounter Center on Sioux City's riverfront. We are a cultural complex. First, the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center opened in September 2002, and this was to commemorate Sioux City's slice of the Lewis and Clark story at 200 years, and it was pretty much focused on events that happened here in this area in August of 1804. We discovered as we went on, the story grew, and many questions unfolded, including the questions of the encounters of Lewis and Clark with Native people, more than 50 different tribes, people. How did they communicate? Just many questions. People began to be more interested. These are many of the things that we did not learn in school. So to increase our possibilities, our setting for programs, exhibits, activities, we built the Betty Strong Encounter Center. It opened December 7th, 2007, so that we would have a greater opportunity, more space, more room, more possibilities for encounters with people, land, and the river of this area. We are a private nonprofit built and sustained by Missouri River Historical Development. In this area, it's known as MRD, M-R-H-D. So as we started with this story that was rather, compact, the story of Lewis and Clark. And one of the first things that happened, in my experience, there was a Jesuit priest who came through, a Father Ray Bucko. This was in 2005. And this was fully a year before the bicentennial concluded in September 2006. By talking to him, he's an anthropologist. He is the author of the Lakota Sweat Lodge, published by University of Nebraska. We began talking about the question of one person on the expedition died. I had been saying that Sergeant Charles Floyd died in this area. And Father Bucko, through our conversations, I started thinking a great deal more. Not just the Blackfeet, young warriors who were killed in a confrontation with Lewis and some of his men, but other questions, deeper questions of why we're here, what unfolded after Lewis and Clark. I don't think there are many opportunities for people to think about that, to hear this voice, to see images beyond the movies, beyond popular culture. And I thought, here we are in this area, this tri-state area, and through conversations and the guidance, particularly of Father Ray Bucko, we began to think about how we would bring a Native voice to this area, to open this possibility of encounter with people who were here long before Lewis and Clark, long before. It seemed that so many people thought life in this area began with Lewis and Clark, which in fact is, not true at all. But in looking at the opportunities for them to learn who was here, who lived here, the Omaha people, and the story of Lewis and Clark wanting to meet them very badly, broker peace between the Otoe, Missouri and the Omaha. This, of course, was to further the U.S. trade interests. So, as they say, we got a lot of stories to tell. We've got a lot of people to meet. We've got a lot of images to see. And just the possibilities of meeting people who may not see the story the same way we see it. When we created and thought about this Encounter Center, which is named in memory of Betty Strong, who is really the reason, one of the foremost leaders that brought the Lewis and Clark Center here. She died in 2004. We think about, let's not just do what we know. Let's look at beyond that, maybe that margin of mystery where we bring other voices in. And so one by one, we brought more images. Through Father Bucko, we brought the images of Father Eugene Beekle, who served on Rosebud and Pine Ridge for more than 50 years. And he was quite a photographer. Father Don Dahl did a book, and Crying for a Vision, it included some of Father Beekle's images. So here were these wonderful images of people at Rosebud, Pine Ridge. And Mike McCormick did a beautiful job in our Lewis and Clark Center of installing these. And I would look at them every day, and I'd want to know about them. You know, the images of people and how they lived together, and how this German Jesuit came to eventually do not only the Lakota grammar book, served them for more than 50 years, but the Lakota dictionary to try to preserve their language. He said, when the blood will assert itself, people will want to know. And that really spoke to me. We all want to know, who we are. And then when we meet other people, to open ourselves to their perspective, to their voice, and listen. So this unfolded in the sense of encounter. It was Father Bucko's idea to name this the Encounter Center. So that whole idea of Lewis and Clark encountering people, how did they communicate, what went on? For us, encountering people every day, and especially people in our own area, Winnebago, the Omaha. It has been such a joy to be a place of encounters. It has been so just exhilarating to say, we're here and we can enjoy each other. We can learn about each other and, the languages, the traditions. And so this is how we've grown. Photography has been a wonderful medium for us. Father Don Dahl's pictures of the children of St. Augustine Indian Mission at Winnebago. That's been a showcase since 2006. And those children inspire people. Absolutely, visitors love those pictures and that promise of the future. And that pride. And they see something that maybe, the stereotypes don't allow us to see. That maybe there's an obstacle there. You look in those child's faces and how Father Dahl captures that life, that future, and that pride and beauty. And it's just remarkable.